On the M27 in Hampshire, there's a lane closed westbound. Someone's broken down at junction 7 at Hedge End near Southampton, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And the latest series of Big Brother has just wrapped up. And as always, the housemates managed to cause a stir.
Yeah, that's an understatement. After 5 weeks of drama and twists and turns, 6 housemates were left to battle it out for a £90,000 prize.
Well, our next guest was there to the bitter end, coming third in this year's competition.
6 weeks you were in there.
Oh, I tell you what, it was a long time.
What goes through your mind? Is it, do you start to go a bit sort of, what do they call it, cabin fever?
Yeah.
Do you go a bit nutty?
Like, at times, not that I've ever been in prison, but I kind of likened it to being in jail, particularly when we were having to eat the porridge with water, no sugar, or, you know, that was difficult. And the feeling that you just can't leave. I mean, you can, but... You know, it was, yeah, it was
You can,
tough.
but you won't get your hands on that prize money.
No, exactly.
You made it to the end.
Yeah.
And it's quite a big house, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you feel as though you can get away from housemates if they're annoying you a bit, or does it feel like your hot house with
no,
people you don't like very much?
If you're sort of, you know, if you're not comfortable with a certain conversation or something like that, you can always take yourself and move away. But can you have time to yourself? No. Not really. I mean, even you might think, do you know what, I'll just go and lock myself in the toilet for a few minutes. There's a camera and there's a mic in there, so you can't escape that. And then you're obviously wearing a mic, so there is that little feeling of, you know, I could just do with having 5 minutes to myself, but you can't really get it.
You've met up with one side of the house, but not the other side yet. But is that still on the cards, do you think?
I hope so, yeah, because I liked every single person in that house, despite a few whispers on the internet, you know, like, do you not like this? I liked everybody in the house, never had a bad word with anybody, so...
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Monday, the 16th of December, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates, who's standing in for Bev Turner.
Well, Prince Andrew is urged to go into hiding this Christmas over his connections to the alleged Chinese spy. The identity of the accused man is currently being kept secret, but Reform MPs are threatening to name him in Parliament.
And the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's international diplomatic tour continues as he looks to form closer ties with Norway and Estonia to build partnerships on green energy and defence.
Yes, the Prime Minister on a 2-day trip talking about security, energy security and defence. I will bring you more from a very windy Norway shortly.
And the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has announced a £50 million aid package for vulnerable Syrians after the fall of President Assad. Meanwhile, Lammy says diplomatic talks are open with the Syrian rebels who toppled the Assad regime.
HTS remains a prescribed organisation, but we can have diplomatic contact, and so we do have diplomatic contact.
And are we seeing a seismic shift in British politics? A new poll suggests it's now a 3-horse race between the usual suspects, Labour, the Tories and Reform UK. We're going to crunch the numbers.
And in more bad news for Sir Keir, voters believe he's the worst Prime Minister in modern history after 5 months in the job. Is Starmer's popularity on a downward trend, or can he turn it around?
And do you have a nightmare relative? Prince Andrew's comes to mind, or argumentative siblings staying with you this Christmas? Because if so, we're going to bring you some top tips on how to stay sane over the festive period. Withdraw the invitation. Relatives coming this Christmas? You couldn't admit it.
No.
If you
Well,
you
no,
had.
of course I couldn't. But no, I have fantastic family, and I'm
Good.
very much looking forward to seeing them. But, you know, it isn't always easy in families, is it? And there is that expectation at Christmas that everybody should see each other and get on.
Wow.
And sometimes that's easier said than done.
Of course, that brings us to Prince Andrew, because will he or won't he be there at Sandringham Church?
I might be the only person in the country, but I feel really sorry for him because, OK, he's messed up in his public role. But, you know, they're still his family. He doesn't have another family. Where's he supposed to go on Christmas Christmas Day?
I think you're right. You are the only person in the country making me feel
sure
sorry
we'll
for
find
Prince
out
Andrew.
from our
I
viewers.
suspect Sarah Ferguson does too.
Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of views. Do send your comments to gbnews.com/your say. But here is the news first with Sam Francis.
Miriam, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's just after 9:30. Well, MPs are ramping up pressure over the alleged Chinese infiltration of the UK following claims a suspected spy formed close ties with senior politicians and royals. The man, identified only as H6, is accused of working for Beijing's United Front Work Department and reportedly met former prime ministers and became a confidant of Prince Andrew. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith is demanding answers in Parliament, while Nigel Farage has threatened to name H6 under parliamentary privilege unless a court lifts the anonymity order. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has acknowledged the complex relationship with China, balancing economic ties with safeguarding national security, while security officials are warning the case is just the tip of the iceberg and calls grow for a tougher foreign influence registration scheme. Well, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat told us earlier this morning that he thinks the government are moving too fast to re-establish UK-China relations.
The Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life. That means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
Calls are mounting for the Archbishop of York to resign this morning after an investigation revealed his handling of a sexual abuse case involving priest David Tudor. While Bishop of Chelmsford, Stephen Cottrell, allowed Tudor to remain in ministry despite knowing he was barred from being alone with children and had previously paid compensation to a victim. The Bishop of Newcastle, Helen Ann Hartley, says Mr Cottrell's actions completely undermine his credibility and believes he should step down. Well, it comes after a damning report into child abuse cover-ups in the Church of England led to the resignation of Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, to protect pensions and avoid any compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions say they've also secured commitments for a worker voice group and 10% share of dividends in the future, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company, though, has faced heavy losses, public complaints and a recent £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. But Kretinsky's plans are for major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as I'm alive. A 12-year-old girl has been charged with manslaughter this morning over the death of an 8-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. She's set to appear in youth court in Leicester later today. Bim Coley was fatally injured in Franklin Park on September the 1st while walking his dog and later died in hospital. A 15-year-old boy has already been charged with murdering the pensioner and is due at Crown Court later this week. Both teenagers can't be named for legal reasons. And Labour is planning the biggest shake-up of local government in England since the 1970s. A paper out later today will outline plans to abolish district councils, introduce more elected mayors and merge smaller councils into larger authorities. The government says it will streamline services and give mayors new powers over planning to deliver housing and infrastructure faster. But district councils warn the changes could cause turmoil, they say, and undermine local decision-making. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner will call the devolution default position for the government in a speech later. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Morning and welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cakes, who's here in for Bev Turner.
Well, if 15 visits to 13 countries since the July election wasn't enough travels for Sir Keir Starmer, he's clocking up more air miles today as he heads to Norway and Estonia.
He's there officially in Norway to launch a new green energy deal. I thought we had an energy secretary who could have done that, called Ed Miliband, who was, by the way, appalling, before joining other world leaders at a defence summit in Estonia.
Well, I suppose the question is, as you said, is that what Secretary of States are for? But every Prime Minister has a different style, and he's obviously taking the first months of his premiership as an opportunity to build bridges around the world.
Yeah, they tend to, Miriam, don't they, Prime Ministers, become Foreign Secretary as well in the latter years of their premiership.
Yeah.
But this one, right at the beginning, I mean, that's... This will be 17 countries.
Yeah.
He's hasn't been Prime Minister for 6 months.
But I suppose, on the other hand, you could say, well, we want Britain to be represented on the world stage at the highest levels, and isn't he right to leave his cabinet secretaries to run the different departments rather than trying to micromanage them, as previous Prime Ministers have been accused of?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who joins us from a rather chilly Norway.
Yes, good morning, both. It's very cold and very windy here, but the rain has just stopped, hoping it holds off. And picking up on what you were saying about the Prime Minister's many foreign trips, I was talking to one of his team a little bit earlier, and I was asking them why he's been to so many places, and they were stressing that for him it's about jobs and money, bringing investment, bringing jobs to the UK. They were pointing to many investments that the Prime Minister has been able to bring back from previous trips. So we're here on a 2-day trip. It's all about security. Energy security and defence. First of all, here in Norway, the PM has already met with his Norwegian counterpart. They visited a naval base, and now we are here at a carbon capture and storage plant, and Norway and the United Kingdom are working jointly on what they're calling a green industrial partnership, which they hope to sign in the spring. A lot of it is around carbon capture and storage. Of course, it's pretty controversial, this technology, isn't it? It's been around for quite a long time, but not really used at scale, and also very expensive. But Norway are leading the way on this, and Britain wants to work with them. They feel that this is going to bring growth, going to bring jobs to the UK. Of course, we had the Energy Secretary announce, I think, some £20 billion invested in carbon capture a couple of months ago, and we've got plants being built on Teesside and so on. Then after this, he's going to get back on the plane. We're going to go over to Estonia for the Joint Expeditionary Force Summit. That's 10 countries led by the UK. It's a sort of defence and security coalition where members of the various armed forces can train together, can share best practice, and could, if necessary, be scrambled if needed. So a very busy couple of days for the Prime Minister, but I can exclusively reveal here on GB News that this is his final trip out of the country this year.
Right, Catherine Forster, thanks so much in Norway. I think you should stay here a bit more. Look at this poll, Miriam, Ipsos poll. 61% of Britons say they're dissatisfied with Starmer. That is the highest dissatisfaction rating for a Prime Minister at this point in their premiership in modern times.
Yeah.
If you remember the difficulties Mrs Thatcher got into in her first year, when there were all sorts of calls for her to go, even she didn't get anywhere near this level of unpopularity. Perhaps if he stayed here a bit more often and tried to fix some of the problems.
Yeah,
I think it
maybe.
makes him look remote and out of touch, flying around the world.
Quite possibly, and I'm still at a loss to understand how carbon capture is going to improve our energy security. Whatever you think about carbon capture, it'd be better if the Norwegians sold us some of their 7 billion barrels of oil or whatever they've got. But I think, you know, Starmer has a lot of things, a lot of problems. He's not very charismatic at all. He doesn't seem very natural when he's speaking, and he wasn't a kind of known celebrity like Boris Johnson was, let's say, when he took over. But on the other hand, I also do think people are becoming more critical, more impatient with the establishment political class, maybe for good reason. And Boris Johnson was the most unpopular Prime Minister at one point. Then Liz Truss was.
Yeah.
Then Rishi Sunak was. So is this actually just a general trend of dissatisfaction with politics in general, rather than being specific to Starmer?
Of course, this same poll, Ipsos poll, shows that it's level pegging between the three parties. You'd think that's the Lib Dems. No, it's Tories, Labour, Reform.
Exactly, it's a big shift.
Farage is breathing down the neck. It is only 5 months, of course,
it
into
is.
the Parliament.
But it's quite hard to turn around a trajectory like that, isn't it?
I think so.
Well, up next, Prince Andrew is being told to stay away from the royal family this Christmas over his links to the alleged Chinese spy. But will the spy's identity be revealed? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
1 in 20 people are diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder across the UK.
Yes, Healthwatch has revealed that men are more likely to suffer from this than women. Did you know?
Triggers apparently include a decrease in daylight hours, which is certainly happening around about now. If you're leaving the office, it's dark. When you come home, it's dark, as well as the falling temperatures.
Yes, and both of those things happen a lot, don't they, here in Britain? So how can we combat the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Dr. Andreas Fonseca, the founder and director of Thrive Mental Wellbeing. Really good to see you this morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, there'll be lots of people watching and listening this morning and saying, what a load of rubbish. It's always been cold in this country. It's always been dark. What is seasonal affective disorder? Is it really a thing?
Well, it is a thing, and it's been known for quite some time. This is not new, really. It is a form of depression. That's what it is. And it's got specific characteristics that kind of differentiate it from other forms of depression. So the reason probably we're talking more about it is because it's basically people are more aware of it and they're recognizing it more. So before you used to be sort of just saying this person's got depression, now you have some specific things to look at that can differentiate it from other kinds of depression, which is quite useful because it's got some specific forms of treatment. So the things that are different about seasonal affective disorder are that for the diagnosis you need 2 years in which you only have episodes during either the late autumn or early winter. So that's when they start, and they fade away by late spring, summer. Early summer. So that's how it works. And you cannot have any episodes at any other time. So it has to be seasonal, specifically seasonal.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 9:46 and you're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
So, is the identity of this Chinese spy going to be unveiled in Parliament today and using an historic right of parliamentary privilege so an MP can say, or he or she can say what they like without any fear of being sued?
Correct.
It doesn't get used very often, but it's important when it's in the national interest.
Absolutely. I mean, it's important in everyday terms because you can't, you know, if you're going to make a speech in Parliament, you can't run it past lawyers before you stand up and say it. But, but this is a very interesting use of it. So this spy at the moment, he's currently known as H6. His identity's been protected, but he's been described as having an unusual degree of trust with Prince Andrew and is also reported to have met with former Prime Ministers Lord David Cameron and Baroness Theresa May.
Well, let's speak to political commentator James Price. James, is or should I? Let's rephrase the question. If the courts, because there is a court order preventing this man being named, if you go on the internet in certain places, you can find who he is. If you're in America or China, people are reading it on their newspapers over breakfast. There will be some people who've done business with this bloke and don't realise he is the spy. So should a Reform MP get up in the Commons and name him?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, my first instinct on this is absolutely yes, of course. Parliamentary primacy is the most important thing that we have in this country, the Parliament, or technically, I suppose, the Crown in Parliament, because let's not forget the royal family in this, given the Andrew link in there. The parliamentary supremacy is all important, and that if you are cowed from saying things in Parliament, then we have no free speech bulwark against any other forms of tyranny. I understand that when courts say these sorts of things, and perhaps when the security services don't want things being spoken about, that there are some exceptions to that, perhaps. Certainly, I think when there are ongoing court cases that might prejudice a criminal trial, I don't think it's therefore appropriate. And I think you saw that with the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, recently in some of I think it was the Southport murder case that's going on at the moment, to try and not talk about that so as to not prejudice the fair trial and get that horrible person behind bars. As a general rule, though, I do think that MPs should be more bold to use this very special law that they've got. The one thing I would say is that I think it's a slight misnomer to focus too much on this one specific case, but for the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is an existential threat to the United Kingdom and, frankly, to all of the West as well. And there are not nearly enough of us who are alive to that existential threat that they face. And that's what we should really be focusing on more broadly.
I mean, yes, James, that's very interesting, because on the one hand, this story has obviously come to light. We're starting to learn more about the activities of the Chinese Communist Party in the UK, and there's lots in the papers today about the different links that British schools and British universities have with Chinese schools and universities. But at the same time, there's a sense that the government is trying to cosy up to China, to try and improve trade links. Are those two positions compatible?
No, they're absolutely not. And I think as time goes on, we will realise the folly of many people trying to think that they were. I think we could see a much higher likelihood of something that nobody wants to think about, which is the Chinese invasion of the island of Taiwan in the next couple of years. President Xi Jinping is a lot more like what the left think that Donald Trump is like. He really is like that. You know, he talks a lot about things like making China great again. His main sort of point from his tenure, the reason, the justification for him extending beyond his 2 terms to being allowed to run the party and therefore the country for life, is to, in his words, try and reunite Taiwan with the rest of the mainland. And if that were to happen, the effects of global trade of all of our economies would be like nothing we've experienced in a very, very long time. It would make COVID, it would make Ukraine seem like a drop in the ocean. And that yet is a real threat that we've not woken up to. So whether it's kind of the supply chain issues of all the cheap goods all the way through to everything else that the Chinese are trying to sell us, through to the kind of critical infrastructure, the fact that, you know, a few years ago, we were looking at allowing Chinese companies like Huawei to build critical infrastructure like 5G communication networks and inveigle their way right the way through our economy. I mean, it's madness when you think back now. We've come a long way, but we've got a lot farther still to go.
All right, thanks for that, James. Let's talk about how this impacts on the royal family, because Prince Andrew has been at the centre of this controversy now 4 days. Every front page is reporting he should uninvite himself from Royal Christmas. Will he be on the traditional walk to the church at Sandringham on Christmas Day with the King and the other senior members of the Royals? Let's talk to the royal commentator, Jenny Bond. Jenny, this puts the King in a very difficult position. Morning to you. Can he say to his brother, stay away from the family? And if he can, should he?
Well, he can. He obviously doesn't want to do that. And should he? Yes, I think probably if he has to, he should. But hopefully Andrew will see the light and he'll read the papers and the penny might drop that this is not the brightest thing to do. Now, Andrew isn't necessarily blessed with a great brain, but surely even he can see that he's going to cause an enormous embarrassment to the royal family yet again. Well, he already has, but if he appears on Christmas Day, that's going to overshadow what should be a really joyful occasion when we see the King and the Princess of Wales back on parade again after such an incredibly tough year. But Andrew is his own man. You know, he has this unerring instinct to hang out with dodgy characters, and he seems utterly blinkered to the fact that they want to befriend him for a reason. These are businessmen and oligarchs and people who have got where they are by driving hard bargains, and they're not going to, they'll want something back, basically. They're not going to give away pots of money, for example, if they have to, Andrew, without wanting something in return. But he doesn't seem to be aware of that at all.
Now, Jenny, some of the commentators today, though, were saying that there's no reason that he would have known that this man was acting as a spy, and now that he is far less an official member of the royal family, he doesn't have the same kind of staffing and background help that would help to check out people that he's doing business. Is it fair to place the criticism for this on him? And, you know, as much as he's been disgraced in a public way, the royal family is still his family. You know, they are his only family. Where else is he supposed to go at Christmas? Do you think it's fair for him to have to hide from view?
Well, he's got Royal Lodge to be at for Christmas, hasn't he? And that's another dispute. I mean, this 30-room mansion where he lives on the Windsor Great Park, he's got his 2 loving daughters. He's got an ex-wife who adores him and with whom he still lives. He has grandchildren. He has sons-in-law. He's got a perfect family unit and a beautiful house to enjoy Christmas away from the limelight. And surely, Andrew, you must say that this would be the best thing to do. I mean, in that Newsnight interview, he said, the trouble is, my fault really is I'm just too honourable. Well, come on, Andrew, let's be honourable. Let's do the decent thing. Just stay away and don't put your brother in this awful dilemma.
10 seconds, Jenny. Will he or won't he?
Probably will.
Jenny Bond, thank you so much. Don't go anywhere, because up next, Foreign Secretary David Lammy is sending £50 million of aid to Syria. Should it be spent closer to home? We'll be asking that on Britain's Newsroom on GBNews News.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. A mild and blustery start to the week for many of us. Looking at the pressure pattern, you'll see plenty of isobars on the chart indicating some quite gusty westerly winds for many of us. We've also got this cold front that's essentially become stuck in the flow and is going to be stalling across northern and western parts of Scotland throughout much of today. Quite a lot of rainfall developing here, so do take care. A rain warning is in force. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, a few showers to watch out for, but generally a much drier day, and we'll hopefully see some brighter, sunnier spells developing at times as well. Quite mild conditions for many of us. Top temperatures across southern areas of England will be around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but that blustery wind is going to be with us, so that will just take the edge off the feel of things a touch when you are stepping outside. If you are further towards the north, particularly to the north of this rain band, we do have some slightly cooler conditions here. So for the likes of Shetland and Lerwick, we do have top temperatures here of 8 degrees Celsius. This rain band will still be in place throughout much of Monday night, and the rain warning is in force all the way through until Tuesday, potentially half a month's worth of rain quite widely across the Highlands by the time we reach the middle of Tuesday. And snow melt as well with those mild conditions will also be an issue for some flooding impacts. Generally, temperatures between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius as we start off Tuesday, and we will see this further area of rain move across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the day. A few showers for England and Wales, but generally drier here, and potentially, again, a bit of hazy sunshine, maybe a touch of brightness developing at times. Strong southerly winds, though, in place. Gales around coastal areas in the west. Those winds, again, feeding in some quite mild conditions. Temperatures of 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. But a shift in wind direction to a northerly later on this week does mean that we will eventually start to see some cooler conditions filtering their way in. So from Thursday and Friday, our temperatures are going to be dropping down. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A832 is closed over Moy Bridge at Marybank because of flooding. On the A1 in Tyne and Wear, there's a lane closed northbound where someone's broken down at junction 73 at Blaydon, causing delays from junction 68. And also in Tyne and Wear, the A167 is closed over the Gateshead flyover. There's safety checks with the road underneath the flyover also closed. The Port of Holyhead remains closed for repairs to damage caused by Storm Dara. The M42 in Warwickshire is closed southbound at junction 9 at Curdworth, where a car's overturned. The accused back on junction 10 at Tamworth. The M1 in Northamptonshire is closed northbound from junction 16 in Northampton to 18 at Rugby after a lorry caught fire, with queues from junction 15A. And on the M25 in Buckinghamshire, it's down to a single lane anti-clockwise where someone's broken down at junction 16 for the M40, causing queues from junction 17 at Maple Cross. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff. And my name is Julie. And we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 16th of December. We are live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates, standing in for Bev Turner.
The Duke of York, the Grand Old Duke of York, is being urged to go into hiding this Christmas because of his connections to the Chinese spy scandal, as politicians are threatening to name the spy in Parliament today.
And Foreign Secretary David Lammy will give £50 million in aid to Syrians after the fall of the Assad regime, as he says talks are open with the Syrian rebels.
HDS remains a proscribed organisation, but we can have diplomatic contact, and so we do have diplomatic contact.
Miles Starmer, he's on his travels again, can you believe it? This time he's in Norway and then he's going to Estonia. He's exploring a green industrial and defence partnership.
And are we seeing a seismic shift in British politics? Polls suggest it's a three-horse race between Labour, Conservatives and Reform UK. We'll have the best pollster in the business on shortly.
And in more bad news in that poll, Sir Keir Starmer is judged to be the worst Prime Minister in modern history at this point in his job. So, can Starmer turn around his unpopularity?
And the government has approved the sale of the Royal Mail to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The Great British institution is set to change hands for the price of £3.6 billion.
Do you have a nightmare in-law or argumentative sibling staying with you this Christmas? No, this isn't a reference to Prince Andrew. If so, we're going to bring you some top tips on how to stay sane over the festive period. I'm sorry about the Royal Mail. I'm amazed the Labour government's allowing this. A Czech billionaire buying it. First time since Henry VIII, who died in 1547, the Royal Mail is going into foreign ownership. I think it's terrible.
Wow. Well, I suppose once you've privatised, it's very difficult to control who then owns it. I think the government is keeping some sort of controlling stake, so they get...
5 years.
5 years. Yes, even the name is only protected for 5 years, I believe. But on the other hand, there is some serious competition out there to Royal Mail now. They're no longer either the cheapest or the most reliable.
Well, they're terrible. I mean, last week they got fined £10 million by Ofcom because they don't hit their targets. But the trouble is, that £10 million fine will just be put into high prices.
But it's almost unfair on them now, given the other competition out there, that they still have to abide by these rules. But it is sad to see a British institution taken over by that. Anyway, do let us know what you think about the Royal Mail and all the other things we're talking about today. Send your views and your comments to gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Miriam, Andrew, thank you very much indeed. It's just after 10 o'clock. Well, the top story this morning. MPs are ramping up pressure over alleged Chinese infiltration in the UK, following claims that a suspected spy formed close ties with senior politicians and royals. The man, identified only as H6, is accused of working for Beijing and reportedly met former prime ministers and became a confidant of Prince Andrew. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith is demanding answers in Parliament, while Reform UK's Nigel Farage has threatened to name H6 under parliamentary privilege unless a court lifts that anonymity order. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper acknowledged the complex relationship with China, balancing economic ties with safeguarding national security. However, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat told us this morning he thinks the government are moving too fast to re-establish UK-China relations.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life. That means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
Calls are mounting for the Archbishop of York to resign after an investigation revealed his handling of a sexual abuse case involving priest David Tudor. While Bishop of Chelmsford, Stephen Cottrell, allowed Tudor to remain in ministry despite knowing he was barred from being alone with children and had paid compensation to evict him. The Bishop of Newcastle, Helen Ann Hartley, says Mr Cottrell's actions completely undermine his credibility and believes he should now step down. Well, it comes after a damning report into abuse cover-ups in the Church of England already led to the resignation of Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions say they've secured commitments for a worker voice group and a 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced heavy losses, public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. However, Kretinsky plans, he says, major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as I'm alive. Sir Keir Starmer is in Norway today to sign a green industrial partnership promoting carbon capture technology. The deal aims to store industrial CO2 emissions under the North Sea, but critics warn it's expensive, untested and could prolong fossil fuel use. Sir Keir Starmer, though, says it will create thousands of UK jobs, boost energy security and position the country as a leader in carbon capture. Here, Labour is planning the biggest shake-up of local government in England since the 1970s. A paper out today will outline plans to abolish district councils, introduce more elected mayors and merge smaller councils into larger authorities. The government says it will streamline services and give new mayors more powers over planning to deliver housing and infrastructure. But district councils are warning the changes could cause turmoil and undermine local decision-making. But Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner is set to call devolution the default position for government in a speech later today.
Well, again, Mr Speaker, I'm sorry to hear that Cathy...
We've heard this morning that a 12-year-old girl has been charged with manslaughter over the death of 80-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. She's set to appear in youth court later today. Bim Coley was fatally injured in Franklin Park on September the 1st while walking his dog and later died in hospital. A 15-year-old boy has already been charged with murdering the pensioner and is due a Crown Court later this week. Both teenagers cannot be named for legal reasons. A convicted terrorist is reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was deeply offended by its sign. It's being reported that 60-year-old Khalid Bakr claims that a depiction of a bearded Arab incites violence, despite him previously being jailed for preparing jihadi propaganda. He also claims it's racist and wants more than £1,800 from the landlord of the historic inn in Amersham. And he plans to take on 30 more pubs with the same name if successful. But owner Robbie Hayes calls it a complete joke, adding that the pub has been called the Saracen's Head for 500 years. And before I hand you back to Miriam and Andrew, close to 1,000 people are feared dead after Cyclone Chido tore through Mayotte in the Indian Ocean, making it the strongest storm to now hit that region in over 90 years. Winds of up to 125 miles an hour ripped apart homes, leaving entire neighbourhoods in ruins and causing severe damage to the main hospital and airport there. 1,600 emergency personnel and supplies have been rushed to the territory, which is home to some 300,000 people. UNICEF is now warning of more widespread disruption to come and an urgent need for aid. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Britain's Newsroom.
Hello, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It's 8 minutes past 10 and you've been sending in your emails. Michael's talking about the Prime Minister's travel across foreign countries, saying travelling all over the world is easy if you're doing it at the taxpayer's expense.
And Janet says if Starmer's concerned about energy security, he should start by sacking Ed Miliband, who's, of course, the energy security
I do
secretary.
actually think that is a fair point, because the green energy plans of Ed Miliband are the biggest threat to our economy and our energy security.
Yeah, and he's unrepentant.
He's very keen on it. Jenny says, I cut out Christmas gatherings with my siblings several years ago, as two of them behave in such a toxic manner that I absolutely hated being around them. I keep Christmas quiet and chilled with my own kids, and it's stress-free.
Yeah, and I love this from Baron, who says, how big is Starmer's carbon footprint these days? Enormous.
Do you think, though, Andrew, that if he was sending Miliband and Lammy to all these meetings, we would be saying, please don't send them to represent Britain?
Well, I wouldn't send Lammy anywhere. I think he's a national embarrassment. I was amazed when Downing Street said he would be Foreign Secretary for the duration of this Parliament, because I just don't think he's up to it. Last week he got completely wrong. He said Libya was next door to Syria.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Oops.
Only 1,000 miles in. Only 1,000 miles in between, and I think Egypt's in the middle somewhere.
I mean, what is quite astonishing is, these politicians have not had experience in government before.
Sure.
Most of them, because they were out of power for such a long time. But on the other hand, you would imagine then that they spent the entire time reading up on everything they needed to know. And I mean, politics changes quickly, and these are all new situations. But
you'd think also, as Foreign Secretary, understanding an atlas or a globe might be an advantage.
I've got to admit, though, I didn't know where the Chagos Islands were until the story
You're not Foreign
occurred.
Secretary.
That's true. Not likely to be either.
No.
Anyway, staying on foreign matters, the identity of an alleged Chinese spy could be revealed by MPs using parliamentary privilege.
Why is it so important we know the name of the spy? Well, let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza, who's the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Alan, morning to you. I mean, if people are keen enough and they surf the internet for long enough, they will find the identity of this individual who's widely reported in the international press. So that's one reason, in my view, we should know. But is there a more compelling reason why we ought to know?
Well, yes. I mean, I think you're right to point out that the identity is widely known online already, and it's sort of rather farcical that British outlets cannot report on something that is well known already and is of material interest to people in this country. The reason we should know the name is because we probably can identify from that circles of influence that this man has penetrated. So the more information we know, the more we can actually chase down what he's done himself and what we think he might have done done, and it'll be very important in a sense to be able to work out who he might have been working with as well. So in a case like this, it is important to know the identity, because it can, of course, reveal further similar people who are occupied in similar activities.
Well, and actually, I saw Brandon Lewis has been challenged about this. He was when he was Conservative Party chairman, he apparently met the man we can only call H6, and he said, well, I don't know that because I don't know who H6 is. So it's probably important that the authorities know exactly who this bloke did and didn't meet, and if the name is out there, those people can come forward.
Yes, exactly. I mean, many people will have been caught up in this entirely innocently. They've been approached, whatever. But if you give the name, they can all consult their diaries and go, right, yes, I do remember that meeting, and he wanted to know about this.
Yeah.
And that could give a clue, of course, as to what China might have been up to by sending this individual our way, and what information they were particularly interested in securing.
Now, while we've got you, Henry, can we move on to Syria? Because David Lammy has announced this aid package to vulnerable people in Syria, but at the same time has said that he is in diplomatic talks with the Syrian rebels, who, of course, are still part of this group that is proscribed by the UK. Is this a moral grey area where, on the one hand, we have to be pragmatic and accept that there is going to be a new government in Syria, which may be better than the last government, but still not at all ideal? Or should we be cutting them off because of their potential ties with terrorism?
I think it's one of these cases where obviously we have a problem. We have a problem because they are a group that was, at least in the past, affiliated with Al-Qaeda. It is correct that they have made lots of, kind of soothing noises in the last couple of months in particular about, what they would like to do in Syria. But they did run the province that they controlled up until this time, according to strict Islamist law. So it's not as if we necessarily think they're going to be a reformed group going forwards. So, look, we have to be pragmatic. They're in command right now, but they're going to have to know that they have to form a broad-based representative government in order to get some unity and stability in Syria. What we should be doing is encouraging the formation of such a government, which brings in all sorts of different people, not just one group, and tie aid to that, basically, to say, look, we're happy to give aid, we're happy to support stability, but you have to show you want stability as well. And that's not going to come from the barrel of a gun. That's going to come from a broad-based coalition, bringing in minorities, people who might not agree with you on religious issues, together to form a coherent and cohesive national government.
Because we don't know, Alan, what assurances the British government has got about what that £50 million will be used for. They're saying humanitarian aid. How do we know it's going to be used for humanitarian aid when we've got this disparate group of rebels running the country? How do we know it's not going to go into guns and ammunition, bombs?
Well, we don't. That's a reality of it. So that's why I think it may have been, sort of jumping the gun, not to mix metaphors here, to have actually put the money down without securing any guarantees first about what the mechanism would be for delivery of aid, and indeed what can be done to ensure that the people who need the aid get it, as opposed to it being misappropriated. I mean, it would hardly be the first time that aid in the Middle East has gone, nominally for a humanitarian reason, then gets, sort of moved into weaponry and other things it's not meant for.
Well, Alan Mendes from the Henry Jackson Society, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's a chaotic situation.
I just think he's gone too quickly.
Yeah.
What's he called, the Foreign Secretary?
Yeah.
Too quick, it's too soon. It's too chaotic at the moment.
Yeah.
I appreciate they need humanitarian aid, but they should have waited.
Yeah, and as horrific as Assad was, the coming disintegration of all the state machinery and things like that, it's going to be, a horrendous situation.
Yeah, look what happened to Libya.
Absolutely, and Iraq. I mean, chaos is always worse than government, even if that government is terrible. Anyway, we'll be following that closely. Anyway, GB News, we'd love to hear what you think. Every day we're running our poll of the day. Today, as the government is looking to shake up local government in England by abolishing district councils with more elected mayors, we're asking, should more power be devolved to councils?
We'll bring you the live results throughout the day, so make sure to stay tuned. The final result will be announced later in the Martin Daubney Show. For all our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Well, up next, your cheque is in the mail. Find out about the Royal Mail takeover and the government's golden share. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Christmas canapé offers partygoers a small treat that staves off hunger and soaks up the fizz. Founder and host of Crazy Sexy Food, Hannah Harley-Young, joins me now with a toothsome selection. Lovely to see you, Hannah.
You too.
Origin of the word canapé?
Yes, French. Sort of from the, yeah, of course, from sort of the 1800s. It means sofa. So it's sort of playing on the analogy of someone sitting or lying on a sofa. It is about the garnish, traditionally sitting on a piece of stale bread or pastry. Obviously, it's evolved over the years. I don't have any stale bread for you, don't worry. But the idea is that it's something sort of garnish, something exciting sitting on a vehicle that you can put in your mouth in 1 or 2 bites.
It's obviously post-war. What is it? Is it 60s or 70s? How long have we been eating these things?
I would say around about then. And I think what's interesting, I mean, I always look towards even the 80s, a little bit sort of later on, where it's, where you sort of have that, sort of the classic vol au vent, which was, you know, a little bit dry, a little bit tasteless. And I think that's why I've brought a real selection for you to show you how far we've come. Another traditional one, obviously, being your pigs in blankets. I'm going to hold off for a second before I choke. Another thing that I have to say about canapés, there are a few little tips that I must give people super quickly. Make sure they're small. 1 or 2 bites. When you're at a party, you're standing, you've got a glass in one hand, you need to hold it. There. OK, I would have preferred a glass of wine, but, you know, I can't stand these canapés where I have to put the glass down in order to eat the food. I want to do it all at once.
I couldn't agree more. You should never eat more than you can lift.
Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:19, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Capes. We've got in our panel here the former Labour advisor Matthew Talbot and the former Conservative Minister Steve Baker going through the papers. You have spotted David Blunkett, who has long been one of my favourite Labour politicians.
And I can see why. I mean, the strength of the language that he's using here is absolutely extraordinary.
What's he saying?
He's saying, if you can't be bothered, then I'm afraid we don't owe you in relation to paying benefits. We don't have an obligation to help people if they're not prepared to help themselves. I mean, this is extraordinarily tough language from a Labour figure.
Yeah.
And when I think back to the vitriol that was and shame that was heaped upon Tory MPs in the 2010 to 15 Parliament, when we were undoubtedly clearing up the mess they'd handed us, my goodness, this is hypocrisy on a grand scale, not from him specifically, but from the Labour sort of movement. So it'd be very interesting to see whether Keir Starmer adopts language like this. Very interesting to see whether the Labour Party in Parliament can bear language like this. And it will be very interesting to see whether Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and his cabinet are able to carry it through.
And it'll resonate with hard-working families. You see the family up the road who've been on benefits for donkey's years.
Oh, look, if I took people to Lane End in Wickham, where really hard-working families often struggle to make ends meet, vote Conservative, expect benefits to be dealt with. On the one hand, they would support Labour adopting this, but on the other, I just really don't buy that Labour figures who I've had to listen to for years will actually go down this road.
Matthew, there is an awakening, I think, on the left, in the Labour Party, that actually benefits culture as we have it now can't go on. And I'm thinking particularly of the figures of, I think, 900,000 16 to 24-year-olds now not in work. I mean, even those on the left of the Labour Party are realising that this can't go on, aren't they?
No, the figures are unsustainable. I struggle with the idea that we're blaming people on benefits, again, as if it's sort of 2002. I think the reason that people get annoyed...
Why did you mention 2002? That's when Blair was in power.
Well, yeah, because that's when it all started. The idea of not quite sanctioning people, that came later on during the coalition and onwards. But I remember signing on during the 2012. Anxiety-inducing. I was looking for work and you were wondering, have I applied for enough jobs? You've spent all hours God sends doing it. The sanctions and the reports of targets of how many sanctions certain staff members could do was one of the most pernicious policies in the last 20 years, for my opinion. I think when you say people get frustrated about people being on benefits for years, I think part of that is, we'll all remember the 2008 crash. No one got angry, really angry at the bankers, because no one lives near a banker. But what you can do politically is you can turn people against those at the bottom of the ladder by because everybody has lived near somebody who's got the curtains closed at 10.
I think we did get angry with bankers, and one of them was driven out of his knighthood.
We should have jailed them, let alone give them the knighthood.
I agree with that.
I think that would have, if you looked at what Iceland did, I think actually we should have got angrier. Yeah. And what actually tends to happen with these situations, and we may see it with Thames Water, and I hope we don't, is when they eventually go bust, you socialise the debt and capitalise the profit and privatise the profit, sorry, and they always get away scot-free.
But Matthew, of course we shouldn't demonise people who are on benefits because they genuinely have no other choice, but when there are social media influencers telling people what sickness to claim and what mental disorder to claim in order to get the maximum benefits, it's very hard not to be cynical about the amount of money that's being spent on these benefits.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff's pathetic. Like, I've always believed in going to work and trying to earn a decent crust and whatever else. I think the part where Blunkett is possibly right and touches on something is he says part of the problem is housing benefit. Now, I wouldn't say the problem is housing benefit, but I know of people back home and very close friends actually who have realised they would be on more money on benefits as such because the childcare is so expensive and they've just had a second child, rather than running a business and putting something back into the economy. So I wouldn't say the benefit system is too generous or the fact that there will always be loopholes and people will find their way around it. I think the problem is you've got to entice people into work sometimes, and that's why we should have a true living wage and not just a minimum one.
And Steve, one of the things Ian Duncan-Smith tried to do when he was Work and Pension Secretary was to crack this idea that it's more advantageous to be on benefit than to take a job.
Absolutely he did, and we were all well behind him. I mean, getting involved with the Centre for Social Justice, Ian's think tank, was one of the first things I did in politics, because we want to get alongside people and lift them up. But Matthew's just hit on a really live point, which MPs will have seen, and that is that some people, particularly if they've got low self-esteem or they're suffering from depression, will be horrified by this kind of language. And they're, of course, not the people you're trying to bear down on. You're trying to bear down on genuine good-for-nothings. And but they're probably relatively few. But people facing incentives like childcare costs and so on, this is a really complicated problem. We've been beavering away at it for years. The trick is going to be to come up with policies which work, which we can afford, which don't bear down on the vulnerable, but do weed out those people who are making choices that they could otherwise turn away from.
I mean, there's millions of people not working, Steve. 2.8 million on sick benefit. I'm sorry, I struggle with that figure.
Oh, yeah, totally. But look, this is a socialist system collapsing. I mean, Matt made the point a moment ago about the socialisation of risk and the privatisation of profit. Well, Michael Meacher, former late, indeed, Labour MP on the left of the Labour Party, John McDonnell on the left of the Labour Party and I, we would all agree that that's not capitalism. It's socialism for the private sector is absolutely wrong. But the system that we have in place is not a classical liberal or conservative system. It is a system of the welfare state, heavy intervention, and we can't afford it and it doesn't work. And we should be really clear about what kind of system is failing. I cannot believe that the old friendly societies, which existed before the welfare state, would have put up with this level of abuse of the benefit system.
Yeah, because if you're being supported by people you know and have a relationship with, whether that's your family or community, you feel duty-bound to get back to work as quick as possible because it's costing them. Yeah. Whereas if it's a faceless remote state that you're just drawing money digitally through every month, you don't feel that same obligation.
And unfortunately, you know, obviously, we can't go back 100 years. But the trouble is, for 100 years, we've been undermining those fundamental bonds of relationship between neighbours. And now, of course, we're seeing the consequences. But we shouldn't pretend otherwise that this is the outworking of the interventionist social democratic state, and it is failing.
And how many people is he speaking for in the Labour Party and using this language, Blunkett, in your view, Matthew?
David Blunkett speaks for himself. He doesn't speak for me. Is David Blunkett? I mean, he's not well. He's obviously grumpy or whatever, and he's decided to weigh in and seem relevant once more. And I don't think number 10 will be happy, and they weren't happy, and neither was number 11 when he was piping up about the national insurance. Although he probably had half a point there. No, he speaks for himself. He doesn't speak for me.
I grew up in Sheffield when Blunkett was the leader of the council.
People's
and
Republic.
it was known as... Yeah, exactly. It was red as red. Anyway, should we move on, talking of socialists, to Angela Rayner's new home in Admiralty House, her new office, I think. I mean, this is a very grand building. I think Churchill's First World War maps are still in the building.
She's being called two jags in a skirt.
Well, that's... totally sexy.
That is our great hero, John Prescott, who had two jags and had a home in Admiralty Arch. She's now got the home in Admiralty Arch. Why does she need a Grace and Favour house?
I think, if I'm honest, she's the Deputy Prime Minister. This is someone
She hasn't even got a Deputy Prime Minister's department, Matthew.
No, and I think that's a mistake. I think all Deputy Prime Ministers, proper Deputy Prime Ministers, should have a...
I mean, she's a glorified housing secretary, although we saw her last week in St Peter's Square meeting the Pope.
Exactly.
Oddly.
Well, yeah,
What's that got to do with housing?
Well, she's Deputy Prime Minister. She's representing us on the world stage.
Right.
And it will have gone down well with
constituents.
who it was? I don't know.
I think somebody had to whisper in his ear.
I think actually, I don't know whether the Pope knows who he is at the moment. But
Stop.
No, I think
He's all right.
he's... No, I think, first of all, from a security point of view, the fact that she's the Deputy Prime Minister, it's all very well and easy to demean Angela because she's a working-class woman. That's totally what it is, right? And, you know, people seem to laugh her off and whatever else. She's had, I think, 7 people go to prison in the last few years because of proper death threats.
Yeah.
And I think the idea the Mail has said, oh, well, she's not going to pay rent anymore because she's in Admiralty House. She doesn't pay rent anyway. None of the MPs in London do because we pay it. It's taxpayer subsidised.
People are laughing at her in number 10, which is why she hardly has any real responsibility.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. As someone on the soft left who doesn't fit in with the boys' club that is number 10. It's the same way I'm no longer there. You know, I want nothing to do with that, most of them. And I think all that will happen is they will eat themselves. There's a reason the Prime Minister is the most unpopular Prime Minister in years, potentially ever. And that also, in a way, is to suggest he was ever popular in the first place. Some of us have been saying this for 6 years now. And I said on election night, I'll give him 2 years. He'd be gone by the Welsh and Scottish elections.
What do you make of Rayner?
Well, 2 things. First, on the very serious security point, she's had her own specific security problems.
Yeah.
But some members of the Cabinet are under lifestyle close protection. That means you've got police officers armed with you all of the time. I was under lifestyle close protection as a Northern Ireland Office Minister, but only in Northern Ireland.
Right.
And that meant staying in Hillsborough Castle, which is a cost-effective way of securing ministers when they're there. So if she requires lifestyle close protection in her role, that's very serious and it's very, very expensive, and probably dwarfs the cost of being in that Grace and Favour.
Which she does, by the way, just to add. I know them. Like, she has at least 2 at all times.
Yeah, so if she's under lifestyle close protection, that's serious, and it takes a lot of expense and cost. But slightly laughable is this thing that suddenly status means that she deserves a Grace and Favour mansion. And that's not about Angela Rayner, that's just classic socialism. We're all equals until somebody's status means they deserve a Grace and Favour mansion. I hope that you will understand. I find that delicious.
Do you think, though, we're descending into a kind of pettiness where everything the Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister does, oh, he's flown to Norway, oh, she's got a new office. I mean, this is quite pathetic when we're talking about people who are at the top of our country, leading our country. Why shouldn't they use the great offices of state?
Listen, yes, because there is a reason why there is a dearth of talent in politics at the moment.
Yeah.
Because why on earth would you want to be scrutinised like this when you can earn double the money in the private sector without having the front-facing sort of media duties, any of the death threats, the abuse online and whatever else? There's a reason why people don't want to go into politics, and it's stuff like this.
Yeah. 100%.
Gentlemen, you're going to have to come back because there's not much more to talk about because the time is 10:30, so we're going to get to our news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. 10:30 exactly. The top story this morning. MPs are ramping up pressure after an alleged Chinese spy known as H6 was, they say, able to slip through the net and form links at the heart of British politics. Critics warn it is just the tip of the iceberg in China's efforts to influence the UK, with spies reportedly targeting politics, journalism and academia. H6, linked to Beijing, was blocked from the UK last year for covert and deceptive activity. Well, Nigel Farage from Reform UK has threatened to name the man or woman in Parliament unless courts lift the anonymity order protecting him. Meanwhile, former Tory leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says Labour's approach to China has left Britain vulnerable as allies tighten their stance. Well, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat told us on Breakfast this morning that he thinks the government are moving too fast to re-establish relations with China.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life that means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
Well, calls are mounting for the Archbishop of York to resign today after an investigation revealed his handling of a sexual abuse case involving priest David Tudor. While Bishop of Chelmsford, Stephen Cottrell, allowed Tudor to remain in ministry, despite knowing he was barred from being alone with children and had paid compensation to a victim. The Bishop of Newcastle, Helen Ann Hartley, says Mr Cottrell's actions completely undermine his credibility and believe he should step down. Well, it comes after a damning report into abuse cover-ups in the Church of England already led to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. The deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions also say they have secured commitments for a worker voice group and 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced heavy losses in recent months, public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. However, Kretinsky says he plans major investments, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as he is alive. Sir Keir Starmer is in Norway today to sign a green industrial partnership promoting carbon capture technology. The deal aims to store industrial CO2 emissions under the North Sea, but critics warn it's expensive, untested and could prolong fossil fuel use. Mr Starmer says it will create thousands of UK jobs, though, boost energy security and position the country as a leader in carbon capture. And a convicted terrorist is reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying it was deeply offensive to have the sign showing. It's being reported that 60-year-old Khalid Bakr claims the depiction of a bearded Arab incites violence, despite him previously being jailed for preparing jihadi propaganda. He also claims it's racist and wants more than £1,800 from the landlord of the historic inn at Amersham and plans to take on 30 more pubs with the same name if successful. But the owner, Robbie Hayes, calls it a complete joke, adding that the pub has been called the Saracen's Head for 500 years. Those are the latest headlines for now. Andrew and Miriam up next, but first a quick look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Well, let's take a quick look at the markets for you this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2656 and €1.2047. The price of gold, £2,102.56 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,274 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Well, up next, we'll be asking, is free speech in peril at our universities? One professor claims he's been sacked for writing negatively about migrant workers. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go away.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. A mild and blustery start to the week for many of us. Looking at the pressure pattern, you'll see plenty of isobars on the chart indicating some quite gusty westerly winds for many of us. We've also got this cold front that's essentially become stuck in the flow and is going to be stalling across northern and western parts of Scotland throughout much of today. Quite a lot of rainfall developing here, so do take care. A rain warning is in force. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, a few showers to watch out for, but generally a much drier day, and we'll hopefully see some brighter, sunnier spells developing at times as well. Quite mild conditions for many of us. Top temperatures across southern areas of England will be around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but that blustery wind is going to be with us, so that will just take the edge off the feel of things a touch when you are stepping outside. If you are further towards the north, particularly to the north of this rain band, we do have some slightly cooler conditions here. So for the likes of Shetland and Lerwick, we do have top temperatures here of 8 degrees Celsius. This rain band will still be in place throughout much of Monday night, and the rain warning is in force all the way through until Tuesday, potentially half a month's worth of rain quite widely across the Highlands by the time we reach the middle of Tuesday. And snow melt as well with those mild conditions will also be an issue for some flooding impacts. Generally, temperatures between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius as we start off Tuesday, and we will see this further area of rain move across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the day. A few showers for England and Wales, but generally drier here, and potentially, again, a bit of hazy sunshine, maybe a touch of brightness developing at times. Strong southerly winds, though, in place. Gales around coastal areas in the west. Those winds, again, feeding in some quite mild conditions. Temperatures of 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. But a shift in wind direction to a northerly later on this week does mean that we will eventually start to see some cooler conditions filtering their way in. So from Thursday and Friday, our temperatures are going to be dropping down. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A832 is closed over Moy Bridge at Marybank because of flooding. On the A1 in Tyne and Wear, there's a lane closed northbound. Someone's broken down at junction 73 at Blaydon with delays towards there from junction 68. Also in Tyne and Wear, the A167 is closed over the Gateshead flyover for safety checks, with the road underneath the flyover also closed. The Port of Holyhead remains closed for repairs. The M42 in Warwickshire is closed southbound at junction 9 at Curdworth after a car overturn, with queues mapping on junction 10 at Tamworth. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 3 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound. Someone's broken down between junctions 5 and 6 from Droitwich to Worcester, causing delays. The M1 in Northamptonshire is closed northbound from junction 16 in Northampton to 18 at Rugby after a lorry caught fire. Queues from junction 15A. And on the M25 in Buckinghamshire, it's down to a single lane anti-clockwise, where someone's broken down at junction 16 for the M40, with queues from junction 17 at Maple Cross.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
The time is 10:39. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Well, a university professor has claimed he's been sacked after writing an academic paper that was critical of migrant workers.
Professor Steve Fotherhill claims Sheffield Hallam University discontinued his employment after his research found that as many as half of jobs in former coal mining areas in Britain were now being taken up by migrants.
Well, Professor Fothergill claims the university did not renew his part-time contract as a result, and has accused the authorities of an assault on free speech. Now, free speech advocate Frank Faridi joins us now down the line. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this is a very concerning case. This professor wrote a paper, did some research, and found that an enormous number of these coal mining jobs had been replaced with immigrant workers, and yet he seems to have been cancelled as a result. How common is this kind of behaviour in universities?
I think it's very common. If you do a research project which realizes or concludes that there are some downsides to migration, then it will be seen as negative, something that shouldn't really be published, something you should perhaps think about before you bring it to the public's attention. And there are a number of subjects, number of themes that you cannot really speak freely on or write about. You're not going to get any grant for projects that go in that direction. And very often the university administration will look down upon you and will try to prevent you from having access to the public with your ideas. So therefore, I'm not surprised, because we have come to the point where a lot of academics are self-censoring. They know what needs to be said, but are too reluctant to say that.
So where does the censorship come from within the university? Is it the academics, the lecturers, or is it the board? Or does it come from the top, the vice-chancellor?
I think it's a kind of difficult subject to untangle, because in the first instance, there is a tremendous amount of self-censorship. And I've known colleagues who sometimes tell me that they would like to publish something, but they will do it in a different name or do it anonymously, or try to find an outlet that will not be noticed. That's the most important area of censorship. In addition to that, the journals, the monographs, the publications are continually policing what's being published in their publication. And very often they will basically ask you to change a few words here or to de-emphasize a particular point that you've kind of come up with. But in addition to that, there is the bureaucracy and the administration, which basically sends out signals that, first of all, you're not going to get promoted, or alternatively, your job will become insecure if you go down a particular line. So there are certain issues that are very sensitive, gender being one of them, race the other, migration is a really hot topic that you're meant to only say good things about. And therefore, I think we live in a world where you have a kind of quasi-totalitarian intellectual regime in the universities. And one I always make is, when I got my job at university 40 years ago, that was the freest place to speak and argue and debate. Today, it's the opposite. It's the most censorious institution in British society.
And Frank, the ideas and the evidence that is produced and found out in universities is, of course, what informs our culture, it's what informs our politics, our policies, our health service. The idea that some evidence is just not surfacing because of these constraints on free speech is hugely damaging, isn't it? I mean, what's the next step, really, for universities who do want to combat this? We saw the Academic Freedoms Bill under the last government, but that's now been rejected by the Labour government. I mean, is there any hope out there?
I think there's always hope. There's no point discussing this between ourselves at the moment unless we didn't think that things can improve. I think that what we need is a few more academics to step up and to be heard. So, for example, in this instance, Professor Fothergill, the man who was fired, was brave enough to bring the issue to the public's attention. We need more people like him to stand up and be counted, because there are a lot of other people who resent the fact that they just got to speak to a script that's not of their own making. And I think you're right, because as long as the universities peddle only one side of the story and influence public debate in that one-sided way, British democracy is always going to be in big trouble.
Did they ever try and censor you, Frank?
No, I had a very good strategy. And my strategy was that I did a lot of work in the media. I wrote newspaper articles, and they knew that if I was ever going to be censored, I would go to the media straight away. And that was my protection. It wasn't the university. It was the fact that I had media contacts who would back me up and allow me to give my side of the story.
Frank, I know in America, one of their tactics is to create new universities. I think there's one called the Heterodox Academy, where it's not controlled by the usual suspects. Do you think there's a call for that in the UK? Would we have more difficulty funding it than in the US? Is it time for an independent university?
I think you're absolutely right. Just as you have GBNews, which is an independent media, which has a different focus than the rest of the media, so too we need independent institutions that are not beholden to the vested interest. I don't think anything positive will occur in the higher education system until we have one or two independent universities that serve as a model of what freedom really looks like.
All right, that's Professor Frank Freddy. Thanks so much for joining us. The freedom of speech as well. I'd like to have seen them try to shut him up.
I know.
They had quite a battle on their hands.
But he's right. You just need more brave people like Kathleen Stock, for example, who did get hounded out.
She
did
lost
lose her job.
That's the problem.
But she...
And how does that pay your bills if you lose your job?
Well,
You've got kids to support.
Absolutely. But unless people do take that risk, it's not going to shift it.
We have to read a statement from Sheffield Hallam, who say Professor Steve Fothergill is not employed by Sheffield Hallam University. He's been seconded to the university for 1 day per week on an extended contract from another employer.
The contract is due to end earlier than planned in January 2025, as we have taken the decision not to renew a number of external contracts due to the financial pressures being experienced right across the higher education sector. Sheffield Hallam University takes its responsibility to protect and promote both free speech and academic freedom seriously. At no point was there any attempt to suppress the research project or its findings.
That's all right, then. Now, up next, voters have branded Keir Starmer the worst Prime Minister in modern history after 5 months in power. Can he turn it round? We're going to be talking to Britain's leading pollster.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's a time for the vegan community to get together, as well as an opportunity for non-vegans to try going plant-based.
Well, joining us now is some of her delicious hummus. We both love hummus. This is a great thing. This is the founder of Chickpea, Hannah McCollum. Hannah, lovely to meet you. And you've brought in some of your beautiful products in front of you here. So can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a range of chilled hummus, and then latest to the range of a new ambient snack pot, which is a fridgeless hummus that doesn't require refrigeration. But I started Chickpea because of my love for hummus, but also sustainability and reducing food waste and encouraging people to be more plant-based without saying go vegan.
Does normal, say, traditional hummus have anything that's not vegan appropriate in it?
Not really.
No,
I think
it's always chickpeas, olive oil, maybe some other bits.
Yeah, lemon juice, aquafibre or water to help with consistency, garlic, and rapeseed oil or olive oil.
And there's a bit of a misconception about veganism that I hear a lot, where people say, look, I'm not a vegan, I love my steaks, I'll just get out of there now. But there's a misconception that you don't get the protein, you don't get the fats, and you're kind of just eating processed salads and, fake meat and things. But that's not quite the case, especially with chickpeas, right?
Yeah, I think protein is really important, and actually a lot of people think I need a certain amount of fish every week or meat, but actually a lot of the fish and meat that you're eating are eating higher protein foods, so algae, seaweed, pulses, all these types of plant-based foods. For me, veganism is like you could have a delicious rye seeded bread with just loads of roasted vegetables, seeds, tahini sauce on top. That sounds and there's nothing beige in there at all.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's nearly 10 to 11, and this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
So, Keir Starmer, as we talk, is in Norway at a press conference. Now, contain your excitement. Here's what he's talking about.
Good to come out here and see for myself this plant here and carbon capture, and of course we are doing similar work on the UK side. So really excellent. To cement that relationship even further, to take it forward in an enhanced way to the next chapter. We discussed today our NATO commitments, and of course that's extremely important in relation to Norway, the eyes and ears in many respects for NATO, and a very important part of the world for global security. And so it is really good on both those fronts to be here, taking them forward with this declaration. We can continue our discussions about Martin Odegaard, which took quite a deal of last night, but again, the closest of our relationships, for me, one of the best Arsenal players we've ever had, so thank you very much for that, on top of the defence and the energy collaboration that we have. Thank you.
Great.
So now we will open up for questions, and the first questions go to the daily newspaper from Norway, VG.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for doing this. My question would be, on your way to the GEF meeting in Tallinn, there's been a discussion between European leaders lately about the security assurances to Ukraine and what should possibly happen if there is a ceasefire or a future negotiated agreement. So I would like you to update us on that, and I would also like to ask both of you whether it's in your plans for your governments to participate in a possible future force to maintain stability in Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, I think we share the view that this war should end. It could end easily if Russia stops its aggression and pulls out of territories occupied. Our principal view is that there should be no negotiations without Ukraine, and Ukraine has to be there to define the circumstances for such negotiations. But it is a war with terrible human costs and destruction, which really should end as soon as possible. So we will support Ukraine on its way to deciding that moment, when that would be appropriate. We have signed previously...
So that's the Prime Minister. If you're listening on the radio with the Norwegian Prime Minister, both of them not wearing a jacket, both of them wearing slightly out of discoloured white shirts and no ties. What's that about?
I don't know, there's obviously a memo. I mean, I thought it was cold in Norway. I thought they'd be wrapping
Do you know what I thought
up.
was really interesting, the press conference? The first journalist called by the Norwegian Prime Minister, a print journalist. In Britain, it's always the broadcasters first.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know much about Norwegian newspapers.
No. Now, the Royal Mail sale to the Czech billionaire Daniel Krasinski has been cleared by the government. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has been speaking in the last few minutes.
The agreement that we have reached means if that does go ahead, this would be a good deal for the UK, be a good deal for the people who work for Royal Mail, and of course it would be a good deal for the customers. It actually strengthens the protections that we have, increases what was in place following the privatisation of Royal Mail with a golden share for the UK government, covering things like the business being headquartered in the UK and paying tax here. So it's for shareholders to approve the deal or not, but if it does go ahead, we have negotiated something which secures the long-term future of Royal Mail and gives it the fresh start that we need. Despite Royal Mail being an entirely privatised business, we have secured, through the UK government's negotiating team, stronger protections than were in place when we said, as a government, that we would work with the private sector to improve public services, to improve investment, the conditions for the economy in the UK. This is what we mean. By approaching this in the right way, if this takeover goes ahead, we're going to be in a stronger position than we otherwise would have been.
All those assurances the Business Secretary is talking about last for 5 years. And
yeah.
then, of course, they can domicile it anywhere. The HQ can be moved abroad. They can even change the name, which has been around since Henry VIII.
I mean, I'm sad that it's being sold to somebody, to a business outside the UK, but even if it was being sold inside the UK, those would still apply.
Now, still to come, we're heading over to the London Palladium, where Andrew Lloyd Webber has given farmers the floor to discuss their concerns about the budget. You know what that's about. It's all about inheritances. Don't miss this. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. But first, we're going to go to the weather. It's a bit cold.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. A mild and blustery start to the week for many of us. Looking at the pressure pattern, you'll see plenty of isobars on the chart indicating some quite gusty westerly winds for many of us. We've also got this cold front that's essentially become stuck in the flow and is going to be stalling across northern and western parts of Scotland throughout much of today. Quite a lot of rainfall developing here, so do take care. A rain warning is in force. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, a few showers to watch out for, but generally a much drier day, and we'll hopefully see some brighter, sunnier spells developing at times as well. Quite mild conditions for many of us. Top temperatures across southern areas of England will be around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but that blustery wind is going to be with us, so that will just take the edge off the feel of things a touch when you are stepping outside. If you are further towards the north, particularly to the north of this rain band, we do have some slightly cooler conditions here. So for the likes of Shetland and Lerwick, we do have top temperatures here of 8 degrees Celsius. This rain ban will still be in place for much of Monday night, and the rain warning is in force all the way through until Tuesday, potentially half a month's worth of rain quite widely across the Highlands by the time we reach the middle of Tuesday. And snowmelt as well, with those mild conditions, will also be an issue for some flooding impacts. Generally, temperatures between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius as we start off Tuesday, and we will see this further area of rain move across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the day. A few showers for England and Wales, but generally drier here, and potentially, again, a bit of hazy sunshine, maybe a touch of brightness developing at times. Strong southerly winds, though, in place. Gales around coastal areas in the west. Those winds, again, feeding in some quite mild conditions. Temperatures of 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. But a shift in wind direction to a northerly later on this week does mean that we will eventually start to see some cooler conditions filtering their way in. So from Thursday and Friday, our temperatures are going to be dropping down. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 16th of December, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates, who's in for Bev Turner.
Well, Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber hands over the London Palladium to farmers as they meet to discuss their next steps in the fight against the government.
150 tractors are also expected at a rally in Darlington, where farmers are continuing their protests against those changes in inheritance tax.
Yes, we're here at Darlington Farmers Auction Mart, where there's going to be 150 tractors gathering for a rally throughout Darlington to show the strength of feeling about inheritance tax since it was announced in the budget.
And Foreign Secretary David Lammy is giving £50 million in aid to Syria after the fall of the Assad regime, as he says talks are open with Syrian rebels.
HTS remains a prescribed organisation, but we can have diplomatic contact, and so we do have diplomatic contact.
And in more bad news for Sir Keir, voters believe he is the worst Prime Minister in modern history after 5 months in the job. Is Starmer's popularity on a downward trend, or can he turn it around?
And in the last few minutes, we've got confirmation the government has approved the sale of that great British institution, the Royal Mail. It's going abroad to a Czech billionaire, Daniel Krasinski, for the price of £3.6 billion, and the trade union, which represents the postal workers, not happy.
Well, do you have a nightmare relative or an argumentative sibling staying with you this Christmas? If so, we'll bring you some top tips on how to stay sane over the festive period.
Well, let's hope the King's watching, because he might need some help on how to deal with argumentative or difficult relatives this Christmas, because currently Prince Andrew's still going to Sandringham.
The advantage the King has, though, is that he has a huge palace. And I think for ordinary families with ordinary-sized houses, when you're trying to cram in all your relatives, I think one of the hardest things, I mean, I absolutely love my family and we're going to have an amazing time, but I think the hardest thing is finding things that people from age kind of 2 to 82 can all do together. That can be a challenge, the kind of cross-generational, can't it?
And the house is permanently untidy.
Yes.
Because there's so many people in there.
And then it's the wrapping paper. Anyway, you just have to kind of go with it, don't you, I think?
You do. Well, and of course, if Prince Andrew is at Sandringham, he won't be staying under the roof of the King, because he'll be staying in a cottage on the estate. There are rather a lot. I think they should put...
You've got a cottage for your relatives?
No. But maybe. So that's it. Now, we'd love to hear what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. First headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's 2 minutes past 11. The top story this morning. Well, in the last few minutes, Sir Keir Starmer has said that the government is concerned about the challenge that China poses, following claims a suspected spy formed close ties with senior politicians and royals. The man, identified only as H6, is accused of working for Beijing and reportedly met former prime ministers and became a confidant of Prince Andrew. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is demanding answers in Parliament, while Reform UK's Nigel Farage has threatened to name H6 under parliamentary privilege unless a court lifts the anonymity order. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, though, has acknowledged the complex relationship with China, but says it's important to balance economic ties with safeguarding national security. Well, the Conservatives' Tom Tugendhat told us on Breakfast this morning that he thinks the Labour government are moving too fast to re-establish relations with China.
The Labour Party is frankly being reckless in reaching out to China as they did at the G20 and as Rachel Reeves is planning to do in January without having the proper protections ready. Look, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme would have built up the pattern of life. That means that incidents like this would have been alerted, would have been brought to attention earlier, and we would have been able to deal with them. Because as the intelligence expression goes, if you want to find a needle in a haystack, first you need a haystack. And the first scheme, particularly with the enhanced tier, would build up that haystack, which means that you can actually find out what's going on.
Well, next to some breaking news regarding the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell. He has just in the last few minutes in a statement said he is deeply sorry that he was not able to take action earlier regarding sexual abuse by a priest in the Church of England. That statement comes as this morning the Archbishop of York has received a number of calls to resign after an investigation revealed his handling of a sexual abuse case involving priest David Tudor. While Bishop of Chelmsford, Stephen Cottrell allowed Tudor to remain in ministry despite knowing he was barred from being alone with children and had paid compensation to a victim. The Bishop of Newcastle, Helen Ann Hartley, says Mr Cottrell's actions completely undermine his credibility and believes he should now step down. It also comes after a damning report into abuse cover-ups in the Church of England already led to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. The government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Krasinski. The deal includes guarantees to maintain a 6-day week letter delivery, protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions also say they've secured commitments for a worker voice group and a 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced heavy losses, public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. However, Kretinsky plans major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as he lives. And breaking news just in from Westminster Magistrates Court. We're hearing that an OnlyFans model, Victoria Thomas-Bowen, who you may remember threw a milkshake over Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, has been sentenced at court today to 13 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months. That's after she admitted, Victoria Thomas-Bowen, that is 25 years old, to throwing a milkshake over the Reform UK leader outside a pub in Clacton-on-Sea in Essex during the general election campaign. So that news just in from Westminster Magistrates Court. Miss Bowen, aged 25, sentenced to 13 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer is in Norway today to sign a green industrial partnership promoting carbon capture technology. The deal aims to store industrial CO2 emissions under the North Sea, but critics warn it's expensive, untested and could prolong fossil fuel use. Sir Keir Starmer says, though, it will create thousands of jobs for the UK, boost energy security and position the country as a leader in carbon capture. And before I hand you back to Miriam and Andrew, the Labour government says it's planning the biggest shake-up of local government in England since 1970. A paper out today will outline plans to abolish district councils, introduce more elected mayors and merge smaller councils into larger authorities. The government says it will streamline services and give mayors new powers over planning to deliver housing and infrastructure. But district councils are warning the changes could cause turmoil and undermine local decision-making. Well, later today, Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner is set to call devolution the default position for government. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Britain's newsroom.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome back. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates, standing in for Bev Turner.
So the farmers are stepping up their action in their fight against the government's budget changes to what they call a family farm tax.
Now, they are having an event at the London Palladium, which is owned by Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, who joined last month's demonstration.
GB News reporter Adam Cherry joins us from the Palladium. Adam, what are the farmers in good spirits? Are they arriving?
Yeah, there's a few Barber jackets starting to arrive on the West End, so people are making their way here. It doesn't start until 12 o'clock, lasts for 3 hours. As you say, it's partially organised or supported by Andrew Lloyd Webber. The Save Family Farming Group, who are organising this, were also responsible for organising the protest on Whitehall last month. There was another one last week, of course, all those tractors we saw barreling down Whitehall. I don't think they'll be able to fit one inside the London Palladium, but it will still be a packed house. Later on in the afternoon, we'll see, or rather we'll hear from Kenny Badenoch, leader of the opposition. She's expected to say that no one is safe from Labour's tax rises. Of course, we saw on the Telegraph front page this morning, CPI economists suggesting that actually with these changes there will be less money coming into the Exchequer than had they left it as it was before. So I'm sure we'll hear plenty of that today, and as usual, spirited debate and lots of Barber and lots of flat caps.
All right, thanks for that, Adam. Let's cross over to Darlington and talk to our very own Anna Riley, where there's a tractor protest from farmers very soon. Anna Riley, of course, is our Yorkshire and Humber reporter. Anna.
Good morning to you both. Yes, you can see the tractors have started to line up here in Darlington. Many signs at the front of them. This one says, "Back British farming, Merry Christmas, you filthy animals." And this protest is all keeping up momentum since the budget. There's still a real sense of anger amongst farmers about that inheritance tax and what that means for family businesses. I'm joined now by Claire Wise. Claire, thank you for coming on. You're a fifth generation generation farmer. Your sign here says, "My family feeds yours." This is your tractor. Just tell me about you and how the budget has impacted your farm.
Well, like many other family farms across the country, and when I say many, I mean thousands and thousands of family farms, this budget will be the end of my farm. We quite simply won't be able to afford to pay the inheritance tax because farm incomes are so incredibly low, which is a covenant we've had with government for many years, that we produce cheap food in return for government support, and unfortunately that covenant has now been broken, and we're in a situation where my business, 5 generations of feeding people, is likely to go under as a result of these budgetary changes.
And you've organised the event that's going to be happening this afternoon with the tractors. Just tell me what's going to happen.
Well, what we did was we put out a call to local farmers to say, if you feel your business is going to be negatively impacted, and I'm talking not just a little bit to the point where you feel like your business won't be able to survive this budget, will you come out and show today? Because we live in quite an urban area, and we feel that people perhaps forget how many farmers, or don't realise how many farmers locally are producing their food, are keeping the environment how we like it. We live in a very beautiful part of the country, and we asked everybody to come. Now, we had no idea at the time that so many farmers are going to turn out. We hopefully will have possibly 100, possibly 150 tractors here today. And every one of those businesses is telling everybody loud and clear they will not survive, and food production in this country will be lost.
And it's not just about feeding people, is it, what you're doing this Christmas? Just tell me about the Christmas present appeal that you've done.
Yeah, I mean, this is about family businesses, and there's a big charity aspect to today. We've collected money and gifts for the local children's hospital and also for local food banks, because we're hard-working families, and we acknowledge that other hard-working families really struggle at this time of year. So we want to give back in the same way that we give back every day of the year when we produce food for this nation.
And what message do you want to get across from today?
The message we want is loud and clear to government. You need to sit at the table and you need to help us sort this out. I don't believe that anybody realised the massive unintended consequences of the budget, the fact that this would be so far-reaching as to drive food production out, which, remember, that will mean food prices go up for the normal person in the street. So we want government, come to the table, let's get this sorted out, let's save family farms.
And how aware do you think the public is? Obviously, a convoy of 150 tractors throughout Darlington, you're going to be getting people's attention, aren't you?
Yeah, listen, that's the saying, isn't it? You need a farmer 3 times a day every time you eat a meal. I think sometimes that is a disconnect and we forget that. I hope today reminds the local people that it's these guys that are here today we have to thank for being healthy, for being fed, and we want their support, because at the end of the day, not only the environment, food production, everything about our rural economy doesn't survive without the family farm.
You're hoping that MPs and the council are going to look at this tractor rally today as well and think?
Absolutely, because again we feel forgotten. We feel like they don't realise how many farmers support the local economy. So yeah, listen, we're here. The only way we could come up with to tell everybody we're here is to visibly show ourselves, and we'll do that today, hopefully, with this yard behind us entirely stacked with tractors.
Thank you so much, Claire. So yeah, this tractor rally here in Darlington, 150 tractors gathering to show that solidarity and strength of support for this farming community here in Darlington up in the northeast.
All right, Anna, that's Anna Riley, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter. They're conducting this very well, aren't they, the farmers?
Yeah.
Very effective.
And it's all around the country. So it's Darlington today. There was one in Ipswich near where I live last week.
Yeah.
So they're clearly on gaining momentum, gathering support across the country. I mean, the Labour Party have been very stubborn about the other unpopular changes they've made, the winter fuel allowance. But the persistence of the farmers, maybe there will be a change.
And the irony, when they arrive at Westminster Square, they were coming to Whitehall and Parliament Square, when they leave, it's far cleaner and tidier, because every scrap of rubbish, and there's a lot of rubbish when they get there, is gone. And they normally leave at least a ton of food in various food banks wherever these tractors go. They're doing a great job, which is why so many people, GB News viewers and listeners, are on their side.
Absolutely. And, you know, good luck to them, because whatever you know, however much you do or don't know about farming, we absolutely need them to survive.
I mean, know how flipping hard they work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
365 days a year.
No. And some of them earn minimum wage when you add up the hours they
that's what the government don't get. It might be asset-rich, the farm. It might be worth £5, £6, £7 million, but they're making a profit which is next to nothing because they are completely screwed on their margins by the supermarkets on milk.
Oh, that's right, yeah, absolutely. And some of them only survive because they diversify and have a farm shop or a restaurant or things like that, which are great things to do, but
look what Clark's has done on his farm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's done so much good for British farming because he has made people realise just how hard... In his first year, didn't he make something like £80 profit?
Yeah.
Despite all that hard work.
All that hard work.
It's just phenomenal.
Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think, so every day we'll be running our poll of the day. Today, as Labour looks set to shake up local government in England, abolishing district councils, more elected mayors are asking,
should more power be devolved to local councils? And we'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned. And the final result of the poll will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show. So for all our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Up next, a convicted terrorist is reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, for God's sake, saying he's deeply offended by its sign. I'm so sorry you're offended, really, for God's sake. Don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you use WhatsApp at work? Perhaps you communicate with colleagues about what your plans are for a particular job, or you communicate with your closest colleague and perhaps sometimes talk about some of your colleagues.
So
who's ever done that?
Why is that a problem?
Well, because whenever there is any kind of sort of breakdown in relationships in a workplace, which happens a lot, tribunals come forward, those WhatsApp messages can be used as evidence. So as long as you're happy for all of those messages to be brought out, which could be to your detriment or not, then fine.
Let's hope they don't publish ours.
Or do you think it's just safer not to use WhatsApp at work at all? That's what the management here would say. That's what the management in a lot of companies are now saying. Apparently the use of them in tribunals have trebled since 2020.
How do you air grievances or gossip or...
There should be no grievances.
So you shouldn't communicate with work colleagues?
Well, and not unless you're prepared for it to be brought in a case. You know, it's a bit like when your rights are read to you. Anything you say may be used against you.
Taken down.
Yeah.
OK. Right, so NatWest have banned staff from creating group chats on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. So we're asking the question now, should WhatsApp and similar messaging platforms be banned in the workplace? We're joined now by social media expert Alan Stevens and journalist Annette Kello. Confused? Am I the only one that's a bit confused on this, guys?
Well, hard to say. I mean, I don't know. I'm reasonably sound on this. I don't think it should be banned. It's a method of communication. I think the way it's used should be controlled, and you should get some very careful training about how you use it in a regulatory environment, of course.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
(11:19), Britain's Newsroom live across the UK with Andrew Bisbee. The panel's back, former Labour advisor Matthew Talbot and former Conservative Minister Steve Baker. Now, gentlemen.
Well, the story that we just trailed before the break there about this chap who's offended by a pub sign, Steve, tell us more.
Well, let me tell you, there is a time for cultural sensitivity, and this is really not it. Just to share with your viewers a bit from the story, in 2018, Baker, he's not Baker, I'm insisting he's no relation, was jailed for 4 years and 8 months after admitting 5 counts of dissemination of terrorist publications. Disgusting. He told The Sun, I've always been offended by pub names, etc. It genuinely makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel unsafe. I've stopped all the terrorism stuff now.
Oh, that's very reassuring.
So, you know, I would say to anyone, even though, you know, I've represented proudly for 14 years thousands of British Muslims who've never raised the Saracen's head with me, even though it's only 25 minutes from my home. And I would just say to anyone who wants to relitigate 500 years on the Crusades, where wickedness was done on all sides, no. This is the UK, and that pub name is... And if you don't like it, don't go.
And what element of British law can he even possibly have a case?
The story doesn't say, but I wouldn't be surprised. But whatever it is, it should be repealed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matthew?
What do you think of this story?
Do you like a pub? Do you like a pint in a pub?
I mean,
yes. I don't drink anymore, but I do like a drink. I love pubs, and I think they're a great community hub. It's where lots of people can go, and I think we're worse off without them being shut and whatever. This is bizarre. I think there is a potential conversation to be had on road names with links to slavery and not a rewriting of history, but, you know, moving on as time goes on. This, I mean, I do respect, you know, a bit of a lovable rogue or a grifter. This guy isn't really one or the other with his background. I think when I read...
convicted terrorist.
Well, no, exactly. Like, it's laughable.
It's a long sentence too.
What he's tried, apparently, is to put something through the small claims court whereby you're owed money. So he's trying to say the landlord owes him money because of the distress it's causing him.
But just to pick up on what you said about, you know, the baby, there's a case for renaming roads. But the problem with that is that in, you know, 100 years' time, people will look back on the things that we do and we find morally acceptable and think that they should be cancelled. I mean, history is history. We don't need to be offended by it. We don't need to... We are ourselves not responsible for it. Why do we need to change these things just because they're no longer popular?
I think because... We've used this before. I've used this before on things like the Equality Act and what the right to offend is and stuff like that. We will move on in 100 years. And I don't think necessarily it's the worst thing to change things again in 100 years because society shifts and changes its mind on what is offensive. And I've used before the example of things like Little Britain, which we all sort of laughed at. It was sort of crude but quite funny. And actually, you look back now with hindsight and as time's moved on and we've changed as a society and gone... It's a bit grim, actually. Maybe it wasn't all that funny. So I think when you start getting into the things of statues and whatever else, I don't know. But I think street names, you know, should you have former slave masters' surnames as a street name and stuff like that? I don't know. It leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth.
What can be offensive about a pub called Saracen's Head?
Oh, no, exactly. No, on this one, it's ludicrous. I think he literally is he's chancing his hand. Yeah, no, he is. And, you know, I'm a man after my own heart in many ways, but this is, like, ridiculous.
I think the polite term is he's extracting the urine.
Yeah. It's a very nice way.
There is a serious point in this, though, isn't there? Is that we don't know exactly which law he's attempting to sue the pub under, but we have
small claims,
OK, but we have a vast swathe of human rights and discrimination law, that much of which is inherited from the EU, that almost encourages people to find division and offence in order to claim.
I've got to say it's the Conservative Party's fault. This was true in 2010. I remember taking it up with colleagues at the time. It wasn't a battle that I could fight as a backbencher. Goodness knows I had enough rebellions. But I'm afraid the Conservative Party should have dealt with this in 2010. We should have got straight back in and dealt with the ridiculous laws which...
The Human Rights Act, Equalities Act...
I'm not saying we should have repealed them all,
but you could have changed elements of it.
So, the Equalities one in particular, it's ended up entrenching positive discrimination against people, which we covered last week. But, you know, there's a range of these laws where incorrect left-wing ideas, which they can defend from a seeming moral high ground, are actually very, very damaging. And this is, I think, another outworking of that flawed system of thought. We need to protect people where they're vulnerable. Yeah. But this is not such a case.
No,
he's a convicted terrorist.
Do you know what? There's room for manoeuvre in some of these acts, and I've put them forward to, you know, the Health Secretary who doesn't care. I think, for instance, the Equalities Act, there's a memorandum of exclusion for people with alcohol addiction. And it's still seen within the Equalities Act to be a personal choice. Now, as someone that is 801 days sober today, I would say it's not a personal choice. It's a disease and it's a mental health issue. Therefore, if you were to get signed off from work with cancer, for instance, and you've got a round of chemotherapy treatment, you'll be given the time off, rightfully so. Now, if you're an alcoholic and you've been given a rehabilitation programme and you've got to take time off, you don't get paid for that. You're not covered by the Equalities Act. So that memorandum of exclusion could be taken out. And there'll be other little loopholes where actually the Equalities Act, great landmark act, in my opinion, lots of room where it could be made better now for the current society we live in. So I don't necessarily disagree.
OK, moving on. One of today's stories is that David Lammy has announced a £5 million aid package to Syria following the overthrow of the Assad regime. Now, I don't think there's any doubt that there are many, many millions of vulnerable people in Syria now who sadly probably will be wanting for food and all sorts of other things. But nevertheless, the group that has taken over the country does have a terrorist history, shall we say. How do we know that that aid money is not going to be used for weapons or all sorts of other things?
Well, we don't, I suppose. I think, I wish it was 5 million, it's 50 million.
Oh, 50 million, did I say 5
even
million?
more.
Sorry, yeah.
No, so I think the issue with this is I've got a friend in Damascus at the moment who went out there to do some work for the UN and the sort of food programme and stuff. His annoyance, he said it's horrendous over there. There's this, and I was cautious. I'm no expert on Syria, but the way that people were sort of cautiously optimistic, very different circumstances. But I thought of like when Mugabe died in Zimbabwe and everyone was celebrating, it's going to be amazing. The next fella came in, nothing's really changed. It's just the system regime is still there. He's getting annoyed that everyone seems to think they're an expert on Syria, and he described the terrorist group that are currently there as horrific, and there are currently 1.1 million people who are displaced there. So I think it's right that we stand by countries who've suffered totally, and, you know, Assad was an awful despot. But I don't know where this money's going. I can only assume it's going to go through, you give it through the humanitarian aid sector. You can't be giving it to them. Like, God knows where they're going to be spending it on. I imagine that will be the case. It does say it will provide food, shelter and emergency health care. And I think part of it is through the World Food Programme and the UN Refugee Agency. So that would be the hope.
Yeah, isn't it too soon, Steve, when the government hasn't decided yet whether to unprescribe, if that's the right word,
well, if it's
this rebel group?
If it's basic humanitarian aid, making sure people have got water and food and shelter, then it's never going to be too soon, is it? I mean, if that's what it is...
Can they be certain it's going to go to the right place?
This is the job of officials in that department.
Not be siphoned off by former people who were terrorists?
It's a hard question. I bet it's difficult to answer, but we employ people to answer that very question. But if I may just step back a bit, the big problem here, it's not that 50 million's not that much compared to the budget, which is, I think, 13 billion. The issue really is that because we've entrenched the total spending target in law, that causes long contracts to be let, so that then when spending needs to be adjusted down, it takes food out of the mouths of babes because that's the stuff that's easy to cut. And really, the whole approach to aid needs rethinking. We should repeal the target for spending in law. Another, I'm afraid, 2010 error. We should repeal the target in law, and we should make sure that absolutely every penny of aid spending goes on things which your viewers would consider legitimate aid to make sure people don't starve and freeze in war zones, for example.
Rather than political education programmes. Talking of political education programmes, another story in the Times that says 5 MPs, including Nigel Farage, Reform leader, have not taken up anti-bullying training put on for them by Parliament. Now, Steve, I certainly did this module, much to my regret. Did you, when you were an MP?
Yeah, I did. It has to be said, the module I was on, we were all Tory MPs and they dispensed with the stuff about checking your privilege.
They assumed you had it.
I think well, maybe they did, which itself would be bias, but I think they read the room. But look, I think what I'd say to Nigel Farage and others is that training's there for a reason. And I've always sought to nurture staffers. And as a result, they tell you what goes on. And it turns out that staffers are very well aware of which MPs bully and which sexually harass, which are handsy in the pub. And MPs have just got to stop it. And that training's there for a good reason. Too many staffers have suffered too much. Where it gets ridiculous is when they're into the check your privilege. And as I say, in my training course, they dispensed with all that.
Just explain what you mean by check your privilege.
Well, I mean, it's not my terms, but it's where they ask you, did you go to public school? No, I went to comp. Did you go, are you from a rich background and whatever?
Exactly. Right. What do you think about these kind of training modules?
You're making a stand for, like, silly reasons. There's much better things you could be making a stand on. And having worked for one MP who was a bully, and I think has...
Can you name them?
No, probably best not. Probably best not.
Can you tell me afterwards?
Yes. I think has had 26 staff over 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Constant. I think the average lifespan's 2.5 months in that person's office. 3 months, sorry, I lasted 2.5, I'd even lasted 3. And some that are good, but it's the most dysfunctional workplace possibly in the country. There's no HR. If you do have an MP who's a bully, they're potentially your line manager, so who do you really complain to? And the ICGS, the independent complaints and grievance system, goes some way. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can get from it. You can't sack an MP, and I wouldn't necessarily think that'd be a good idea because you'll get spurious complaints and otherwise. But huge amounts of sexual harassment and power imbalance in that building.
You absolutely can publicly humiliate an MP in a way that ruins them for the rest of their lives, and the complaint system is capable of doing that to MPs. Absolutely. But this is really serious for those staffers. A sharp word spoken in anger after a difficult period in the Commons can really cut through to a staffer, even something as likely as that to happen. And this training's important. The ridiculous bits should be taken out, but Farage is absolutely wrong to boycott it. He should learn something.
You both mentioned sexual harassment. You're an MP, Minister, you've worked in the Commons. How widespread is that?
Far more widespread than it should be. But look, I used to commute home, and the only reason I didn't commute home was because I was doing my ministerial box. Right. So I used to keep out of the bars. But I'm afraid the stories of staffers, which still circulate, I'm told, I'm obviously not in their WhatsApp groups, are extremely disappointing. And, you know, anyone who thinks they can just opt out of this training and these procedures is kidding themselves. But,
I mean, I personally didn't think the training was helpful at all. I mean, you might be right, there's a need for it, but not the kind of training that was given. Certainly the one I experienced was all about, you know, ridiculously woke concepts about privilege or, you know, racial biases and things like that. And actually, what would have been much more useful is some just basic employment training, because lots of MPs have never been employers before, and yet suddenly you're an employer. There's nobody to hold your hand with those kind of things. So I'm not saying there's no need for training, but I personally thought that it was ridiculous.
Well, the bits you've just mentioned, I think we would, as one would expect, we would converge on those ridiculous bits being ridiculous. But the thing that really struck me was they did a montage of actors' voices saying the things which staffers had said. And it just, any MP listening to that would think, actually, sometimes a sharp word in difficult circumstances cuts too hard.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for that. We're going a little late to the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11, 11:30 in fact, and the top story this morning, Sir Keir Starmer has said the government is concerned about the challenge that China poses following claims a suspected spy formed close ties with senior politicians and royals. The man, identified only as H6, is accused of working for Beijing and reportedly met former UK Prime Ministers and became close with Prince Andrew. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith is demanding answers in Parliament, while Reform UK's Nigel Farage has threatened to name H6 under parliamentary privilege, unless a court lifts the anonymity order. Well, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has acknowledged the complex relationship with China, but says it's important to balance economic ties with safeguarding national security. The Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, has apologised for not acting sooner, he says, in the case of sex abuse by priest David Tudor, but insists there was no cover-up. Tudor, banned for life from ministry after admitting abuse involving 2 girls, was not removed from the Church of England until fresh complaints emerged. Mr Cottrell said it was impossible to have acted sooner and described the case as horrible and intolerable. His statement this morning follows an investigation, and he stressed that Tudor was never protected. Well, Cottrell is set to take on additional duties when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, steps down in January. A 25-year-old OnlyFans model has been handed a 13-week prison sentence, suspended for 12 months for throwing a milkshake at Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Victoria Thomas-Bowen admitted assaulting Mr Farage outside a Clacton pub during the general election, covering him with yellow liquid and damaging a security guard's jacket. Mr Farage, now MP for Clacton, said the attack left him saddened but unhurt, as he was simply going about his job, he said. And the government has approved the £3.6 billion sale of Royal Mail's parent company to Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. That deal includes guarantees to maintain 6-day-a-week letter deliveries, to protect pensions and avoid compulsory redundancies until 2025. Unions say they've secured commitments for a worker voice group and a 10% share of future dividends, while the government retains a so-called golden share. The company has faced heavy losses, though, public complaints and a £10 million fine for missed delivery targets. But Kretinsky says he plans major investment, saying he'll support Royal Mail for as long as he is alive. Those are the latest headlines for now. Andrew and Miriam up very shortly. First, though, we'll take a quick look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's how the markets are shaping up this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2656 and €1.2047. The price of gold, £2,102.56 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently standing at 8,274 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Afternoon, good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emily. Tom's back.
I am indeed.
Literally just back.
I flew in, landed this morning. It was a bit touch and go as to whether I'd make it to the studio on time.
Thanks for that, Tom.
Inevitably, the plane was delayed. But, you know, that's...
Did you be in Washington?
I had, yes, and New York, and had a marvellous time meeting so many amazing people out there. So, yeah, I don't know, I might have a story or two to tell on the show.
Ooh, I want to hear about it, your little trip to Washington. I feel like you did quite a lot of touristy stuff, but then you met some big wigs.
Met some big wigs at some of the big think tanks out there. I went around Congress and... well, I've got a story about that I will tell a little bit later in the programme.
We've got so much to talk about. I feel like on a Monday, there's always so much to get our teeth stuck into. I wonder how people feel about this Czech billionaire being allowed to buy Royal Mail. Do we agree with this? Is this just the free market in action? Tom, you think it is? I'm not so sure. I think, you know, this is a heritage business for us. Back since Henry VIII.
But once you privatise
first foreign owner.
How can you stop that?
We can't behave like it's still a nationalised company. It's not. And if it's in the private market and someone wants to spend wants to invest billions in the UK, well, in order to buy it, that's what he'd have to do.
How does he know he's not going to drain it of any money that's
there's only a 5-year guarantee, isn't there?
5-year guarantee, that's it.
So I'm not sure about this. I think, you know, for a company that's so British, should it be bought by a Czech billionaire? I don't know.
Although I don't know. I think...
It's got the King's head on it.
But here's the thing. There have been so many privatised British companies where Brits run them and they strip it of any sort of British or royal or all of that iconography. I think actually foreigners probably respect our royal family more than some of our own entrepreneurs.
I think Royal Mail are struggling anyway because all the other entrants to the market are cheaper and more reliable. If he can turn that around, then, you know, good luck to him. But I don't have a lot of hope for it, really.
No, and I suppose this is the thing about a market. I mean, just because something has been around for 500 years, if it's no longer providing the best service at the best price, and there are other things that do that...
this is my small C conservatism coming out. This is my small C. Some things are worth more than money and profit, tradition, heritage, Britishness. I don't know. But we're also going to be able to attract a protest, which is going to be very exciting up in Darlington.
Yeah, it looking pretty good.
And the London Palladium.
Yeah, so we should have some pretty spectacular images of all of that. And just one final thing, are the local elections actually going to be cancelled? Or at least will some of the councils no longer go up for election? Because Angela Rayner today, during our programme, will be announcing a reorganisation of local government. Some are seeing this as a power grab and a way for certain councils to avoid elections in May.
And that might suit Labour.
You'd think.
I think they're heading for a very bad result in May, I'd have thought.
Well, that polling from Ipsos doesn't exactly look great, does it?
Amazing.
Well, all that and much more up at midday with Tom and Emily. But up next, if you're not feeling festive yet, we have a wonderful Christmas message from a church minister. Don't miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. A mild and blustery start to the week for many of us. Looking at the pressure pattern, you'll see plenty of isobars on the chart indicating some quite gusty westerly winds for many of us. We've also got this cold front that's essentially become stuck in the flow and is going to be stalling across northern and western parts of Scotland throughout much of today. Quite a lot of rainfall developing here, so do take care. A rain warning is in force. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, a few showers to watch out for, but generally a much drier day, and we'll hopefully see some brighter, sunnier spells developing at times as well. Quite mild conditions for many of us. Top temperatures across southern areas of England will be around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but that blustery wind is going to be with us, so that will just take the edge off the feel of things a touch when you are stepping outside. If you are further towards the north, particularly to the north of this rain band, we do have some slightly cooler conditions here. So for the likes of Shetland and Lerwick, we do have top temperatures here of 8 degrees Celsius. This rain band will still be in place throughout much of Monday night, and the rain warning is in force all the way through until Tuesday, potentially half a month's worth of rain quite widely across the Highlands by the time we reach the middle of Tuesday. And snow melt as well with those mild conditions will also be an issue for some flooding impacts. Generally, temperatures between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius as we start off Tuesday, and we will see this further area of rain move across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the day. A few showers for England and Wales, but generally drier here, and potentially, again, a bit of hazy sunshine, maybe a touch of brightness developing at times. Strong southerly winds, though, in place. Gales around coastal areas in the west. Those winds, again, feeding in some quite mild conditions. Temperatures of 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. But a shift in wind direction to a northerly later on this week does mean that we will eventually start to see some cooler conditions filtering their way in. So from Thursday and Friday, our temperatures are going to be dropping down. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We had one day, we had...
GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates, who's in for Beverly Turner.
Yes, welcome back. It's 11:53 and... Sorry, 11:43. Getting ahead of myself there. You're watching GB News. And now, during Advent, as we count down to Christmas Day, we're hearing from church ministers across the country. Each day, they have a special hope-filled message for you to celebrate the festive season.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 16.
Hi, I'm Chris Tufnell. I'm the vicar of Uterbridge Parish Church near Sheffield. Chaos or calm? Which word better describes your experience of Christmas? The Christmas cards give us pictures of idyllic calm, don't they? Robins on snow-covered postboxes, Mary and Joseph having a quiet night in. But that's not what Christmas feels like for many of us. And in reality, I'm sure it's not what that first Christmas felt like either. After all, Mary went through childbirth in a stable. And I'm pretty sure it won't have been calm like on the Christmas cards. But it does say in the Bible that after the shepherds had gone, Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. She had good reason to ponder these things. After all, they were happening to her. But I think that we have good reason to ponder these things as well. You know, I think it's hard to deny that Jesus has influenced this world more than anyone else who's ever lived. That's a big claim, I know, but I think it's true. And so might you, this Christmas, like Mary, find some calm amid the chaos to ponder this man who has changed our world forever. Happy Christmas.
How nice is that? He comes across really well. You know him, of course.
Yeah, he's a fantastic speaker. And you can see all of our special Advent messages. What day are we on? I've forgotten the date already. 16. So there have been 16 so far, so 8 left to come, I think.
Do your children have an Advent calendar?
They have an Advent calendar each, yeah. When I was a child, we didn't have chocolate ones because they weren't... Well, they were around, but we didn't have one. But now they're much more kind of...
Yeah.
You know, the thing, aren't they?
Well, that's a great lure, isn't it, for them to...
I know. But it's terrible, isn't it? Have first thing in the morning a piece of chocolate. Anyway, it's only once a year or 24 times a year.
We weren't allowed to open until we got back from school.
Ah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
They went to clash with the cornflakes.
No, you can have it on your cornflakes. That's good. Anyway, you can see all of those Advent messages on gbnews.com/Advent. Merry Christmas.
Now, let's be seeing what you've been saying on gbnews.com/. You'll say lots of texts and emails coming in.
Susan says, I think this is on the subject of the terrorist convict who's offended by a pub name. She says, people are offended by things every day. Where will it stop? I agree.
And Valerie's on the same subject. Most newcomers don't realise the names of pubs are usually linked to previous landmarks, incidents or monuments in a locality. I think the Saracen's Head relates to a famous statue or painting that probably got destroyed somehow, and as a sign of respect, the pub got named after it. That's a logical explanation.
Yep. And on the subject of local council reform, KJ says, how has devolution worked for Scotland and Wales? I would suggest badly. It's just an excuse to blame councils for the failure of government policies.
What is the point of another expensive reorganisation of local government? It will cost hundreds of millions of pounds in bureaucracy. It will take forever.
I know. But our local government does not work very well in this country. We are so centralised compared to almost all other Western countries.
This will make it more so, don't you think? That
I don't know.
Isn't Antirani going to take more power for the centre?
But on the other hand, in some areas you have tiny councils, some areas you have big councils. I don't know. But yeah, more money, more time. Anyway.
Do you think the public are clamouring for that? I think what they want is their refuse, their litter collected on time. They're fed up with all the rows over recycling. They want the dog poo cleaned up.
But in some ways, councils don't have enough power anymore because so much of it got taken away under George Osborne. They should have more power and be more accountable. I think that would work better.
Now, up next, if you're dreading having to host relatives overnight this Christmas, we've got some expert tips to keep the peace and your sanity. Take note, Britain's royal family. This is Britain's Newsroom, GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Our next guest has a rather unique career story. She was working at a pub aged 18 and Holly Farmer was spotted by a modelling scout and it turned out to be her lucky day.
Scott Yoz Clark sent this message to Holly.
Holly, 18, 5'10", she does not belong in a pub. And I absolutely love that, Holly, because it's a bit like Dirty Dancing, where it's like, you can't put baby in the corner. Holly does not belong in a pub. You belong on the catwalk. What was that moment like for you when you were scouted by Yoz?
It was crazy. I have to say I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Like, I was just on my lunch break. I was working at a pub, so... I was on my lunch break walking, going to Primark and...
You're going to Primark?
Got stopped by yours.
How did that interaction go?
Well, first question was, how tall are you? So, 5'10".
Very much that.
Yeah, then he gave me his card and asked, explained everything, that he's a model scout, obviously.
Yeah, because generally when I scout, especially when I get close to that person, I tend to look in their eyes, and when you see something there, it's like everything works on the face, and then the eyes gives you away.
Well, you've spotted a gem in Holly. I mean, you can tell even when you walked in, you are built to be a model.
I did my first fashion week here in London and then went to Paris, and it was really fun. Wow. Now it's my full-time job. It's a bit crazy, to be honest.
Wow.
To be able to say that modelling is my full-time job now. Some brands will ask you to be a bit more serious, and then others not
so it depends on the client's request as well. Ellie, give us your best model face. Ready? 3. I wonder if we can come back. 3, 2, 1. Very nice.
What do you think? High fashion.
Yeah.
But you guys do all contorted moves, don't you?
Yeah.
Like all this high fashion. Do yours?
I'm just permanently living in model
You actually
model
are,
world.
though. He actually
this
does.
is it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. As Christmas arrives, many of us may be dreading the idea of having guests staying over, or perhaps you're the one dreading about staying over somewhere else.
Well, with all the tips on how to combat this, we're joined by behavioural psychologist and relationship expert Jo Hemmings. Jo, I've got to ask you first of all, have you got a house full this Christmas?
Actually, this is my first Christmas, but I don't because I'm a new grandma. So I'm going to stay at my son's house. But normally I do because I have a birthday on Christmas Day. My son has a birthday on Christmas Day. So add that to Christmas, and I've always had a massive house full. Yeah.
Wow, very impressive. So what would be your tips, Jo? Because even for people who get on very well with their families, it's quite intense over Christmas. There's a lot of pressure on, all the food preparation, often lots of people in a small space. It's inevitable that there are some tensions. How would you encourage people to deal with those?
Look, I think the thing is, your job is to create, the big feasts. And after that, I think you kind of leave your guests to it. So firstly, I'd say introduce them to the kitchen. Here's the coffee machine, here are the tea bags, here's the toaster, here's the dishwasher. Let them get on. You're not going to make smashed avocado for the 18-year-old in the morning, and you're not going to make a big fry-up for Uncle Jack. Tough luck, get on with it. Don't overplan. So yes, you want to do this great Boxing Day walk, and you've got this idea that the kids, some of them will have a hangover, some will sleep in late. Kind of just be easy with it. I mean, make sure their rooms have got water in and towels and toiletries so no one's going, I forgot my toothpaste. Just kind of prep that bit, but then make it clear once the big day is over, the next day is kind of a bit DIY, help yourself, maybe cold cuts for a meal. Go to bed before others. You don't have to wait for everybody to go to bed if they want to sit up drinking or whatever they do, watching telly. You can still go and leave them. They know where their rooms are. So I think it's just, and if you've got a dog, take it for lots of walks to kind of breathe. And if you haven't got a dog, just go out for the walks anyway. But I think it's all about just not getting over-pressured about that sort of situation and just live and let live once the big Christmas Day meal is done and cleared up, obviously, with everybody.
What advice would you give King Charles to do? Because, of course, his troublesome brother Andrew. Would you tell him to stay away completely or embrace him?
I think I'd go somewhere down the middle, navigate that route. I think, look, don't cut him out. Christmas, it's a family then. It is a time for forgiving people. So we all have family over that perhaps haven't been marvellous or perfectly behaved during the year. But I wouldn't suggest that he embraces it either. I mean, kind of, a nod to what you've done and how you behaved badly wouldn't go amiss. But he is part of the family, and I would think sort of giving him the cold shoulder and not inviting him seems a bit mean at Christmas.
Well, thank you ever so much, Jo, for that. I'm sure we'll be following your advice. Well, that's it from Britain's Newsroom today.
It is. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. We'll see you tomorrow.
Could your right to vote this May be taken away from you? Well, that's the fear after the government refuses to commit to holding local elections in certain areas, all to do with their devolution reorganisation plan. But could it take away your vote?
Crucially. And also, will Labour come to regret selling off Royal Mail to a Czech billionaire? We'll put that question to you. Let us know what you think about it. Are you happy with Royal Mail being sold off to the highest bidder? Let us know. All of that to come 12 till 3.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers,
sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. A mild and blustery start to the week for many of us. Looking at the pressure pattern, you'll see plenty of isobars on the chart indicating some quite gusty westerly winds for many of us. We've also got this cold front that's essentially become stuck in the flow and is going to be stalling across northern and western parts of Scotland throughout much of today. Quite a lot of rainfall developing here, so do take care. A rain warning is in force. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, a few showers to watch out for, but generally a much drier day, and we'll hopefully see some brighter, sunnier spells developing at times as well. Quite mild conditions for many of us. Top temperatures across southern areas of England will be around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but that blustery wind is going to be with us, so that will just take the edge off the feel of things a touch when you are stepping outside. If you are further towards the north, particularly to the north of this rain band, we do have some slightly cooler conditions here. So for the likes of Shetland and Lerwick, we do have top temperatures here of 8 degrees Celsius. This rain band will still be in place throughout much of Monday night, and the rain warning is in force all the way through until Tuesday, potentially half a month's worth of rain quite widely across the Highlands by the time we reach the middle of Tuesday. And snow melt as well with those mild conditions will also be an issue for some flooding impacts. Generally, temperatures between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius as we start off Tuesday, and we will see this further area of rain move across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the day. A few showers for England and Wales, but generally drier here, and potentially, again, a bit of hazy sunshine, maybe a touch of brightness developing at times. Strong southerly winds, though, in place. Gales around coastal areas in the west. Those winds, again, feeding in some quite mild conditions. Temperatures of 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. But a shift in wind direction to a northerly later on this week does mean that we will eventually start to see some cooler conditions filtering their way in. So from Thursday and Friday, our temperatures are going to be dropping down. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff. And my name is Julie. And we won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's midday on the 16th of December. It's a Monday. And this is Merry Christmas, Britain.
I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, one afternoon at the Palladium, farmers gather in a theatrical show of unity against Labour's contentious tax raid. Andrew Lloyd Webber's venue will play host to the major event as workers demand a reversal. Our reporter Adam Cherry is there for us.
That's right, I'm here in the West End where the farmers have descended upon the London Palladium to protest those measures in the budget, that inheritance tax measure that is hated so much by farming communities. We'll also be hearing from Kemi Baker